Hello and welcome back to Introduction to Business 1. In this chapter, this is chapter 3, we're going to take a look at the concept of ethics and what it means to make ethical decisions in business, as well as take a look at the concepts of corporate social responsibility. So take a few minutes and take a look through the learning objectives for this chapter. Keep in mind that these learning objectives are a good source of review when you're reviewing for your term tests and your final exam, because you can take a quick look at the learning objectives and make sure that you understand some of the concepts that have been introduced in that chapter. So take a minute and go through these objectives. In this chapter, we're going to take a look at some of the ethical concepts surrounding business, and also take a look at what the concept of social responsibility is in business today. You will no doubtedly be taking some additional courses on ethics and talking about ethics throughout your business studies as well as your business career. Huge topic in business today, and with some recent corporate scandals that we've seen, it's really tied or placed a lot of emphasis on the ethical conduct of business in Canada. So what is ethics? Really, ethics are simply the standards of behavior, or standards that are accepted by society as right versus wrong. Now, sometimes that's very difficult to be able to establish, particularly in a country such as Canada, where we have such a vast, multicultural, ethnic, diverse population. However, throughout time, there are certain concepts or certain moral values that have been accepted as right and wrong. For instance, the concepts of integrity and respect for human life and self-control, courage, honesty, self-sacrifice, throughout the ages have been determined by societies generally as being the right things to do, whereas cheating, cowardice, cruelty, murder, those things are clearly wrong. So sometimes it's easy to define what is right and what is wrong. However, there are some difficult ones that you will encounter in your business career. Is bribing right? Some societies, bribing is accepted as a normal course of doing business, whereas in Canada it might not be. You may be faced with situations where you need to terminate an employee because they've got some personal problems, which is affecting their performance at work. How do you deal with that? Do we need to tell the truth about everything? Is it right to download music or movies over the internet? What about cheating? What about plagiarism? We've all done it. Is it right to use an employer's photocopier for your own personal purposes? Is it right to take a pen, to take office supplies from your employer? These are all issues that you're going to face throughout your business career. So it's important we start to understand what ethics is and what it isn't, and provide some tools for you in helping resolving those ethical dilemmas. Exhibit or figure 5.1 in your textbook outlines some high-profile corporate scandals that we've seen over the last few years. We've seen some information lately on the federal government sponsorship scandal. We've seen Conrad Black, who once headed Hollinger International media empire, be convicted of stealing millions of dollars from the company. A huge case in the United States that had ramifications for many Canadian companies was Enron Corporation and their non-disclosure of billions of dollars of debt from their financial statements, which really overstated their stock and bond prices. And there was also some insider trading where some of the executives benefited from the fraud that was taken, and lots of charges, and in fact some
three of Canadian banks, CIBC, the Royal Bank, and TD Bank, were charged billions of dollars for their liabilities in various related lawsuits. We've seen Arthur Andersen, a big accounting firm, was convicted with tampering with evidences with respect to shredding documents. They were Enron's customers, or accountants and auditors, and they shredded tons of evidence, which resulted in the demise of one of Canada's largest, and the United States' largest accounting firms. We've seen theft at Tyco International and other accounting irregularities from various companies like WorldCom that led to the demise of companies. So these scandals and lawsuits have really focused on the subject of ethics. Now, when considering ethics, we have to understand that moral and ethical behavior goes beyond the law. So ethics deals with the proper relations with and responsibilities towards other people, whereas legality, or the law, deals with much narrower issues. It deals with laws we've written to protect ourselves, but society gets into trouble when they consider that those laws to be the same thing as ethics. So you're going to encounter many concepts through your career where something may be illegal but may not be ethical. Consider a small business operating in rural Manitoba, the sole employer or the largest employer in that town, ready to retire, and he decides to close the plant. Is that legally wrong? No. If he's the owner, he has the right to just close down the plant, lay off all the people. Is it the ethical thing to do? Maybe not. So you're going to encounter all sorts of ethical dilemmas in your business career.
Our own individual ethics come from, or our background, the environments in which we live, the environments in which we work, the country in which we work. So there's a lot of factors that affect individual ethics, as well as, and that is basically the same for a business. Business ethics are focused by the external environments and the backgrounds, and individual ethics of the employees that are working for them. There are a couple of fundamental concepts where these ethics come from. One is the concept or the philosophy of utilitarianism. And basically what that means is people should act or do things that generate the greatest good for the largest number of people. So when considering ethics, if it affects the largest number of people positively, it's the right thing to do. There are a few problems with that theory in ethics, because sometimes the costs of something that might be defined as ethical under the concept of utilitarianism is just too great. For instance, if I were to tell you that I could cure all forms of cancer by sacrificing the next, 2,500 babies that were born in Canada, and if I were able to do that, I could develop a cure for cancer. So under the concept of utilitarianism, that of course would be the right thing to do. However, the cost is so great that it would not be accepted by society. Another problem with utilitarianism is that it always involves winners and losers, and sometimes it may not be the most appropriate thing to do. Ethics also comes from our individual rights that we have in Canada. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that came about in 1982 guarantees Canadians fundamental rights. The fundamental freedom of expression of religion, freedom to assemble, and democratic rights, the right for mobility, legal rights, equality rights, where everyone's equal under the law, etc. So that will form ethical decisions as well. And the third is the concept of justice, or the question of fairness in society. So what is considered fair according to the standards of the society in which we live? So our individual as well as business ethics are really founded based on a large number of factors. Just like we mature as we age, hopefully, our ethics will go through various stages of development as well. The basic form, or often the case in children, there's the first stage of ethics is something that's called pre-conventional ethics. And this is kind of the ethics that are very childlike in nature. It's very self-centered, calculating, and in some cases selfish. For instance, most drivers will exceed the speed limit when driving, but they will slow down when nearing a spot where they think there could be radar. That is pre-conventional form of ethics because it's very self-centered, and it's not, the ethics is not based so much on what they believe is right or wrong, but for the fear of being caught. Same thing, students may not cheat on a test because they're afraid of getting caught, not because it's the wrong thing to do. So that is the basic or pre-conventional ethics. The next stage in the development of ethics is something that's called conventional ethics or social ethics. And it moves away from that self-centered viewpoint towards the greater good of the organization becomes more important. So at this level, a business person might think that even though our advertising strategy or a campaign is very misleading, as long as it increases sales, it's the right thing to do, that it's okay to do it. So right or wrong isn't the issue, only whether the marketing campaign would benefit the organization. So conventional ethics goes beyond self-centeredness to the greater good of the organization, or it could be the society in which we live. The third level of ethical development is what we call post-conventional ethics. And those are the ethical standards of the mature adult. They think less about themselves, but they focus more whether things are right or wrong in the long run. So, for instance, a business person might decide not to use packaging in their product distribution or in their products because it's the wrong thing to do from an environmental perspective over the long course of time. So that is the highest level of ethics, and we've all gone through each of those stages individually, and businesses will go through those same stages as well.
This is just a very, very brief questionnaire on your ethical style, your style of ethics. So take a minute first and complete that for yourself. Just go through and answer each of the questions that are listed there, and then take a look at the scoring mechanism, which is in the middle of figure 5.3 on page 146, and just count up the number of C's that you get and the number of J's that you get. Okay, so hopefully you've done that. The scores in your questionnaire show how strongly you prefer one or other of two major styles of recognizing and resolving ethical dilemmas. The higher your J score, the more J's you have, the more you rely on an ethic of justice, versus if you had a high C score, the more C's, you prefer an ethic of care. Neither style is better than the other, but they are different. They may initially seem opposed to one another because they're so different on the surface, but they're actually very complementary. In fact, as the scores in your questionnaire show, you probably rely on each style to a greater or lesser degree. You can appreciate both approaches, but you'll be able to understand or resolve ethical dilemmas and communicate with people who prefer the other style if you understand those styles. So let's talk about the ethic of justice. The ethic of justice or rights is based on abstract and impersonal principles like justice, fairness, equality, authority. People who prefer that style see ethical dilemmas as involving primarily a conflict of rights that can be solved by the application of some general principle. The statue, Justice Blindfolded, captures this approach very well. People with this style tend to place a good deal of weight on moral principles, laws, policies, which they believe should be applied to all equally. They usually do not like making exceptions based on special circumstances, and they worry about setting precedent. The advantage of this approach is it looks at problem solving very logically and impartially, and people with this style try to be objective and fair, hoping to make the best decision according to some standard that's higher than any specific individual's interest. The disadvantage of this approach is that people who rely on it might lose sight of immediate interests of particular individuals. They may unintentionally ride roughshod over the people around them in favor of some abstract ideal or abstract policy. People who strongly prefer this style might tolerate human harm in the name of some principle, and sometimes others might consider them as inflexible, cold, and uncaring. This style is more common of men than women, and a lot of people who define themselves in more solitary, individualistic terms. It seems to fit with a more legalistic approach to life that gives allegiance to some external source of authority. This approach sometimes goes along with traditional management styles that prefer to justify decisions according to the policies, impersonal standards, or rules of the business in organizations today. If you have a high C score, that's called the ethic of care or responsibility, and it's based on a sense of responsibility to reduce harm or suffering to people around them. For these people, moral dilemmas generally involve the conflict of duties or responsibilities, and people with this orientation believe that the focal point of every ethical dilemma is the specific individuals involved and the particular circumstances of the case. Solutions then for people of this style must be tailored to the specific details of individuals. Notions of equality or what is appropriate or fitting tend to be favored by this approach. These people don't mind making exceptions to the rules, and they tend to feel constrained by those policies that are supposed to be enforced without exception. The advantage of this approach is that it's responsive to the immediate suffering and harm. This approach is flexible, it's caring, it's supportive, and it can respond quickly to changing circumstances and not preoccupied with the idea of setting precedents. The bad news is that by focusing so much on circumstances, people with this orientation can lose sight of the forest for the trees. Reliance on that gut feeling can limit appreciation of other factors. When carried to an extreme, this style can produce decisions that seem not simply subjective, but rather arbitrary. So this style is more common of women than men, and also common of people who define themselves primarily in terms of their relationships with other people. It seems to fit with a more situational approach to life. This orientation seems related to a management style that is sensitive to the consequences of decisions on the individuals involved and considers consensus building to be very important. And it emphasizes having people to do things as a result of personal buy-in rather than simply following orders. So understand some of your your leanings towards ethical decisions, ethical dilemmas, it may help you in your business career.
So this is just a summary of what the concepts of having an ethics of justice might mean, as well as the ethics of care. So hopefully the ethical orientation questionnaire that you just did kind of gives you an understanding of what drives your ethical base, your own individual ethical base.
I want to introduce the concepts of ethical dilemmas and ethical lapses. An ethical lapse is when we make a decision that is clearly ethically wrong, whereas an ethical dilemma may have arguments on both sides and we need to make a decision. For instance, let's think about the manufacturer of a new drug. As they're trying to market that drug, they know that it does have some significant side effects that they do not disclose, yet they still seek to get approval from the FDA to market the product. Clearly, that would be an example of something being ethically wrong and is clearly an ethical lapse. However, if there was unconclusive evidence that there was some potentially bad side effects 10, 20, 30 years down the road, is it the right thing to still pursue approval and start selling that drug? That would be an ethical dilemma that you might have in your business career. What's the right thing to do? There's some tools that will help you in resolving some of those ethical dilemmas. First of all, easiest question is it legal? Clearly, if it's not legal, society says that it is not the right thing to do. So it would be unethical as well. However, as we said, ethics goes beyond legality. So another question you might ask yourself is it balanced? Am I acting fairly? Would I want to be treated this way? So we must take a look at whether that decision is balanced or fair to all. An ethical business person usually has a win-win attitude. In other words, they try to make decisions that will benefit all parties involved. If that's not balanced, if there's clearly a winner and clearly a loser in that decision, is it the right thing to do? Another tool to use is something that's called the front page test. If I make this decision, how would I feel about myself? How would I feel if that decision became written all over the front page of the Winnipeg Free Press tomorrow? How would my peers see me? How would my friends see me? Would I feel proud if my family learned of my decision? Could I live with myself if I make this decision? So individuals and companies need to have some tools to be able to guide employees, and many companies have developed a strong ethics code, which helps them to make sure that they are conducting business ethically.
As you know, Canada has a very diverse ethnic and population base in Canada, and diversity has always been an important factor in developing Canada. Multiculturalism is the fundamental belief that all citizens are equal, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds. This diverse population base has some impact for businesses in Canada, for instance, from a marketing perspective. It's important to consider those changing demographics because it may affect the types of products and services that we offer to our potential customers. It may amend. We may need to rethink our marketing strategies. As well, from an employee base, research shows that companies that do a great job at managing diversity within their workforce tend to have happier employees. They tend to be more productive. They tend to outperform the competition and can actually be a form of competitive advantage. So it's important in business to consider the ethnic and multicultural nature of our population.
Organizational ethics begins at the top of every organization. People learn their standards and values from observing what others do, not from hearing what they say. So leadership of companies can instill corporate values in employees. Any trust and cooperation between the workers, between managers, has to be based on fairness, honesty, integrity, and openness. And really the same thing can be said about relationships among two businesses as well, or among countries as well. A business should be managed ethically for lots of reasons. To maintain good reputations, keep customers, attract new customers, avoid lawsuits, reduce employee turnover, and to avoid government intervention, which such as Sarbanes-Oxley Act that we'll talk about in a little bit, which are new laws that control business activities. Also important to act ethically to please all of our customers, our employees, and our suppliers and society, and really to do the right thing. Ethisphere magazine annually ranks corporations based on their ethics, and they look at innovation that contributes to well-being, corporate citizenship and responsibility, corporate governance, internal controls and policies surrounding ethics, executives' commitment to ethics, as well as the legal and regulatory track record, and ranks corporations based on those standards. So you can click a look at by clicking on the link above. You can take a look at the most ethical companies determined by Ethisphere magazine in 2008. Evidence shows that the world's most ethical companies consistently outperform the Standard & Poor 500 matrix. So evidence suggests that by acting ethically, companies will actually do better and become more profitable and provide a higher return for their shareholders' investments. So very interesting to take a look at the relationship of those companies that are deemed to be ethical compared to investor returns on other companies' returns. The concepts of social responsibilities in business have changed throughout the last few centuries. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the prevailing view amongst industrialists or workers or companies was that business had only one responsibility, and that was to make a profit. Caveat emptor, or buyer beware, was kind of the rule of the day. If you bought a product, you paid the price, you took the consequences. So no consumer groups or government agencies would help you if the product was defective or caused harm. There's a famous quote of William Vanderbilt, of the Vanderbilt family, multi-billionaires, that emphasizes this principle. His quote was, "The public be damned, I'm working for the shareholders." In the mid-20th century, Milton Friedman's view of company social responsibility kind of came into effect, and he believed that businesses had a social responsibility that went beyond producing profits, but also said that corporations and businesses had a responsibility to provide jobs for society and pay taxes, but not anything more. So a little bit of an expanded view of social responsibility came about in the middle of the 20th century. In the 21st century and today, there are different views of social responsibility. It's much more expanded to balance the profit objectives of organizations with the concept of providing back to the communities in which we serve. A recent Business Week poll found that 95% of adults reject the notion that a corporation's sole job is to make money. So many investors and managers now have a broader view of social responsibility. A company has an obligation to society beyond profits and becoming and really that becoming more socially responsible can actually improve a company's profits. More and more companies today and the employees that work for those companies care about the communities and want to be part of a greater cause. But some of the challenges is trying to balance those initiatives to allocate resources properly. There's two views of corporate responsibility to stakeholders today. One is a strategic approach that requires that management's primary orientation be towards economic interests of the shareholders, as opposed to the pluralist approach, which recognizes the special responsibilities of management to optimize profits, but not at the expense of the stakeholders. So in the 21st century, some version of the pluralist approach clearly is become the norm.
Acting in an ethical manner is only one of the four components of the pyramid of CSR, or corporate social responsibility. Social responsibility really is the concern of businesses for the welfare of society as a whole. And it goes beyond the obligations that are required because of the law or because of employee contracts or union contracts. At the fundamental core of the CSR pyramid is economic responsibilities. The corporation must first be profitable and has to provide returns for its shareholders to survive. So economic responsibilities form the core of the CSR pyramid. Second is legal responsibilities. Of course, all businesses must follow the law, and it's necessary to do that for success of the organization. Next is based on the foundation of ethical and or economic and legal responsibilities is what we call ethical responsibilities, and this is where the corporation can turn now its matters to ethical considerations only after ensuring that they've got a good economic and legal foundation. And at the top of the pyramid is philanthropic responsibilities, and that's really the highest level in the triangle. And that's where organizations give back to the society. Many organizations allow employees to participate in volunteerism during working hours. Many corporations provide huge donations to academic institutions such as the University of Winnipeg, United Way participation, and really focus on giving back to society at the highest level of the CSR pyramid.
So given that it's important for businesses to be managed ethically, many organizations will have a written code of ethics. In fact, 89% of organizations surveyed recently have written codes of ethics. Ethics codes can really be classified in one of two different ways. Some of those ethics codes are more compliance-based. And what they do is those type of compliance codes emphasize preventing unlawful behavior by increasing control within the organization and by having some fairly stiff penalties for anybody violating those policies and those controls set forth in that organization. Other organizations use a more integrity-based approach when dealing with ethics. So those are ethical standards that define the organization's corporate values, the environment within which they are going to operate, and those help create ethically sound behavior throughout the entire organization, and really makes all employees at all levels in an organization accountable for their own actions. This is just a brief summary of Johnson & Johnson Company's Code of Ethics, or what they call their credo. And there's a link, actually, that you can take a look at their credo as well. In fact, it's much lengthier than this, but this is a quick summary. So their credo, or their Code of Ethics, sums up all the employees' responsibilities to four important stakeholder groups. The first is their customers. They have a responsibility to provide high-quality products so that customers can trust those products and afford those products so that they're offered at a fair price. They have a responsibility to employees to treat them with respect and dignity and pay them fairly and help them develop and thrive, both professionally and personally as well. They have a responsibility to communities and society as a whole by being good corporate citizens and supporting good works, encourage better health, and protecting the environment. And Johnson & Johnson believes that if they satisfy or focus on the customers, the employees, and the communities, that the stockholders will automatically receive a fair return on their investors. So it's interesting to take a look, and you can search on the internet some other companies' corporate code of ethics as well. But this just highlights a brief summary of one such company's code of ethics. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, commonly called SOX, was passed in the United States in 2002, and it now protects whistleblowers such as Watkins, who was an employee of Enron, who blew the whistle on the company's false reporting practices. And this act provides for reinstatement and back pay to people who are punished by their employers for passing information about frauds to authorities. This law requires all public corporations that trade on any of the stock exchanges in the United States to provide a system that allows employees to submit concerns regarding any accounting or auditing issues, both confidentially and anonymously. And in 2004, the federal government introduced Bill C-25, which is the Disclosure Protection Act, and this law covers all federal and public sector workers and Crown Corporation employees and provides them protection for whistleblowing. In 2005, the Canadian government passed Bill C-11, and it really applies to almost the entire public sector, and it provides for significant powers to investigate any wrongdoings. It contains a clear legal prohibition of reprisal against those who make good faith allegations of wrongdoing, and it proposes measures to protect the identity of people making disclosures or reporting fraud to the authorities. So Canadian and U.S. regulators have established rules requiring public companies to establish procedures for the receipt, the retention, and treatment of complaints received by a company regarding any of those accounting or internal account control or auditing matters, as well as rules to respect confidentiality for employees of a company that do express those concerns. I spend a lot of time with making sure that I have practices and procedures in place to respect the controls required under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. All public organizations have had to comply with this act, and it's really cost many companies millions of dollars to be able to have the proper policies, the proper reporting practices, the proper controls in organizations to prevent fraud and unethical treatment of employees.
A company is perceived to be socially responsible when it meets its obligations to its stakeholders. And when we talk about stakeholders, it's really any person or organization that has a vested interest in the company or to whom the company has a responsibility. So in the next few slides, we're going to take a look at the 5 primary groups or primary stakeholders that have a vested interest in the company, and that being employees, investors, our customers, our suppliers, as well as to the government and society as a whole.
Businesses can show responsibility to customers by satisfying customers by offering products and services that provide real value. By dealing with customers honestly. Consider the Maple Leaf recall of packaged meat products after the listeriosis scare recently. The company was very honest, recalled all their meat products, and provided detail to customers rather than try and hide the fact that they had a problem and that they were working to resolve it. By providing products that are safe to use is another way that businesses can show responsibility to customers. Another way, or fourth way, is by listening to our customers. Customers want to be able to voice opinions. They have some good opinions. So by providing with a means to listen to customers, allow customers to provide feedback and respond and act on that feedback is another way to show responsibility to our customer groups. Businesses can show responsibility toward the investors by providing a fair return on their investors. Many investors choose to put their money into companies whose goods and services benefit the community and the environment as a whole. And as we saw, we can actually show that many customers do better by doing well and acting ethically and responsibly actually can provide a higher return to investors. We can show responsibility towards investors by acting ethically, by making sure that we're providing accurate financial reports to them, being truthful about issues and policies and problems to investors. Another ethical concern is insider trading. Insider trading is an unethical activity in which insiders use private company information to further their own fortunes or those of their family and friends. So consider the case of Martha Stewart, who was actually convicted of using insider information or information that wasn't available to the public and using that to her own personal advantage by selling some stocks before some information became public, which is an illegal activity. Businesses can show responsibility to investors as well by not misrepresenting the investment. There's millions of investment scams that occur every year, and investors are taking a stand. They're targeting board members who don't go to meetings and have perhaps conflicts of interest with the firms that they own or operate in. Another way to provide responsibility to investors is by using audit committees that review and sign off on all financial financial information or financial statements, and is supposed to protect stockholders by acting as a check on management's corporate reporting methods and asking tough questions about their accounting practices. So lots of ways that businesses can show a responsibility towards their investors. Another stakeholder group that businesses can show responsibility to is employees, by creating jobs, hiring local workers, by making sure that compensation is fair and employees have an opportunity to progress in their careers and progress professionally and personally, and perhaps provide training programs for those employees, making sure that employees are all treated fairly and have a safe environment to work within, and can work in an environment that is free from harassment or discrimination based on age or gender or sex or cultural background. So these are different ways, and there's many more, that businesses can show responsibility towards their employees. Businesses can show responsibility towards society as a whole by providing those safe products and promoting social justice and caring for our community by donating back to the communities in which they operate within. Perhaps many organizations provide volunteer time for employees to be able to participate in many of the charitable organizations and fundraising efforts of those organizations during normal work hours. Businesses can show responsibility towards society as a whole by being responsible to the environment as well. That includes things like making sure that we use our natural resources efficiently, recycling programs, limiting the amount of pollution, including cutting greenhouse gas emissions, which are believed to affect the Earth's climate and temperature as well. So many ways that governments or businesses can show responsibility to our environment and society as a whole as well.
Poor business ethics can have some disastrous impacts to organizations and businesses today. And hopefully by now you understand that having a strong ethic foundation can actually provide a competitive advantage for businesses. And so there are some things that businesses, corporations can do to improve or ensure a strong foundation in ethics throughout the organization. And many of you may have received a formal ethical code of conduct which helps employees to make good ethical decisions as they're working. One of the things that organizations can do is lead by examples. Top management can set a strong example for ethics because employees will follow the example set that are set forth by their managers and senior managers. Many organizations offer ethics training programs to help them make the best ethical decisions, how to and whether appropriate to accept gifts from customers, for instance. So training programs to deal with the situations that customers will be exposed to in their business career. And of course, having a formal code of ethics is one way that many organizations set forth the ethical standards that are expected of all employees. There are four important trends that are affecting both ethics and corporate social responsibility in business today and will affect us going forward. The first is the fact that experienced workers are in high demand. We find today that many organizations can't find those skills in the workforce, so many retirees are coming back to work, and that means that corporations have to be more responsive to meeting their needs and offering flexible work arrangements, part-time, and being sensitive to their requirements. A second is the growth of social responsibility. That continues to grow, will continue to grow. Society is expecting more and more uh, responsibility by major corporations, more transparency by organizations, employees and customers alike are demanding more higher standards of ethics of our corporations. There's more protection for whistleblowers and those that are signaling that corporations perhaps are not acting ethically. Um, so we need to be cognizant of that. Um, we've also seen some introduction of this Occupy movement, um, where uh, protesters really spotlight organizations that perhaps are greedy and perhaps are not living up to high ethical standards. So we've seen some of those Occupy movements in Canada and throughout the world today. And international companies today, with the increase in global trade, are really expected more and more to act ethically and responsibly, both in their domestic countries as well as in the countries in which they choose to do business. So it's becoming much more demanded by the world as a whole.